Overheard my husband's best friend making inappropriate comments about my daughter at her birthday party. When I confronted him, my husband defended him. Hey there! Welcome back to my channel. Whether you're here for the first time or coming back for more, I'm so glad to have you. If you enjoy what you hear today, please help me hit that 1,000 subscriber mark. It would really keep me going. Now, let me ask you, have you ever been in a situation where you felt completely betrayed by someone you trusted? Have you ever found yourself fighting for your family, but feeling like you're in this battle all alone? Today's story is all about that. A woman who's done everything to protect her children, only to realize that the person she thought would always have her back isn't standing by her when it matters the most. Stick around to see how she handles the situation and what happens next. Let's dive in. It was supposed to be a perfect day, a celebration of my daughter's sweet 16, a day that she had dreamed of for months. We worked hard to make it special. I, a mother who always tried to do my best, poured all my energy into the details, transforming our backyard into a vibrant party space with custom decorations, floating lights in the pool, and a DJ booth for my daughter's music-loving friend. The cake was overpriced, but it was worth it to see the joy in her eyes as she blew out the candles. My daughter, Isabella, had always been the kind of girl who liked standing out, and for this special day, she wore a red bathing suit while all her friends wore blue or black. It was a cute idea, and I even found myself excited about how it would look in pictures. My husband, Daniel, thought it was just a teenage girl thing, but he went along with it. For me, it wasn't just about the party. It was about making Isabella feel loved and celebrated. The day was off to a great start. The kids were having fun in the pool, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. Daniel was grilling, people were mingling, and the laughter was contagious. I felt proud of everything we had pulled off, but there was a lingering discomfort in the air, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. And then it happened. The party was still in full swing as I moved around the house, trying to keep everything together. The noise of music, the clinking of glasses, and the voices of teenagers mixed in with the occasional laughter. My daughter Isabella was having the time of her life, surrounded by her friends. It should have been a happy, carefree occasion. Everything had been meticulously planned, from the custom banners and the floating lights in the pool to the overpriced but delicious cake. But even as I smiled, something didn't feel right. A nagging feeling deep in my stomach told me that not everything was as it seemed. I found myself in the laundry room, a small space I often retreated to when I needed a moment of solitude. I was grabbing some extra towels for the kids who had just gotten out of the pool. The house was buzzing with energy, but the laundry room felt oddly still, as if I had stepped into another world. The music from the party barely reached my ears, the voices muffled by the walls. It was supposed to be a break, a moment to take a breath, but instead, it felt like the calm before the storm. The laundry room was next to Daniel's office, a place where he usually went for some peace and quiet during family events. I didn't think anything of it at first, but then I heard a familiar voice, a voice I'd heard for years. It was Jake, Daniel's best friend, the man who had been a fixture in our lives for as long as I could remember. I was so used to hearing him laugh and joke around, part of the family, that it didn't strike me as odd at first. But then I heard his words. At first, I thought he was just talking to someone else, but quickly realized he was on the phone. The conversation felt distant at first, the words blending in with the background noise. But then there it was, Jake's voice, unmistakable, cutting through the buzz of the party. "She looks way hotter than the girls I knew back in the day," he said, his voice a casual drawl, as if he were talking about any other young girl. "If she were 18, I'd have my eye on her. That red bathing suit. Man, she looks too good in it." I froze. The towels slipped from my hands as a cold wave of shock washed over me. Couldn't breathe. My thoughts were scrambled, and I struggled to process what I had just heard. Isabella, my daughter. I stood still in the small room, my heart pounding in my chest. How could this be happening? How could someone I had trusted, someone who had been a part of my family for years, speak about my daughter in such a vile, disgusting way? The words swirled around in my mind, but they didn't make sense. I had to be hearing things. But no, he had said it. He had mentioned her by name, by her bathing suit. There was no mistaking it. I felt my stomach turn as a flood of emotions rushed through me. I couldn't move. My body was frozen, my hands trembling. The man I had welcomed into my home, the one I had considered family, was now saying these horrific things about my daughter, my little girl. How had I missed the signs? How could someone be so callous, so completely disrespectful? The words kept echoing in my head, each repetition like a slap across my face. I couldn't stand it anymore. The anger, no, the rage, built up inside me like a storm. My mind screamed at me to do something, but for a moment, I couldn't figure out what. Should I confront him now? Should I pull him into the office and demand an explanation? Should I march out there and let the whole party know what he had said? But in that moment, I didn't think. I just acted. I moved toward the door, my body instinctively taking the steps to confront this monster who had been hiding in plain sight. I burst out of the laundry room, determined, my heart racing. I could feel the eyes of the guests on me as I moved past them. Some curious, some confused, but I didn't care. The only thing that mattered was that Jake had to leave. Now, I walked straight up to Daniel, who was standing near the grill, talking with a few friends. His face turned toward me in surprise as I grabbed his arm and pulled him away. For a moment, he didn't understand what was happening, but I didn't give him time to ask. I couldn't even explain. I didn't have the words to express the boiling anger, the deep sense of betrayal that were rising inside me. "Come with me?" I snapped, the sharpness of my voice making him flinch. He looked at me, his face still puzzled, but I wasn't about to waste any time. I yanked him towards the house, the weight of what I had just heard still pressing heavily on my chest. As we walked through the house, I could feel the tension building in my body. Each step felt heavier than the last. We reached the office, and I flung open the door, my chest tight with both fury and fear. Jake was sitting there, still oblivious, still on the phone. He looked up in surprise as I entered, and I wasted no time. "Jake," I said, my voice shaking with barely contained rage. "You need to leave. Now, you are never to be around my children again." The moment I spoke, Jake's face turned red, his anger flashing like a wildfire. He immediately started cursing at me, his words sharp and venomous. "You're invading my privacy in your own house." His voice rose with every word, and I could see the vein in his neck throbbing. The bravado in his tone made me sick, but I didn't care. How dare he speak about my daughter in such a vile way? Every word he spat was like a slap to my face, but I couldn't back down. I had no choice but to confront him now, to make sure he understood the gravity of what he'd done. The anger in me had been building since I overheard his conversation, and now it was pouring out of me in full force. "How dare you?" I snapped, my voice trembling with the fury I had kept bottled up. "How dare you speak about my daughter like that? You, who have been in this house for years, who've spent holidays with us, laughed with us, called yourself family. How dare you say something so disgusting?" Jake didn't flinch. Instead, he shot me an icy look, his mouth curling into a sneer. "You've always been so sensitive. It's just a joke. God, lighten up," he said, dismissing me with a flick of his hand. His words were like salt in a wound that hadn't even had time to heal. I could feel my chest tighten with rage, but I wasn't done. He needed to hear it from me. He needed to know that what he did was unforgivable. "No, Jake," I said, my voice low but firm. "This is not a joke. What you said about my daughter, about your so-called attraction to her, that's not a joke. And you need to take responsibility for it." His face contorted with disgust, but not at himself. No, it was at me, like I was the one in the wrong. "You're overreacting as usual. Stop making everything about you. I don't need this drama. I didn't even mean anything by it." It was like he was trying to rewrite the situation in his favor, twisting it to make me seem irrational, overdramatic. But I wasn't buying it. I was done letting him manipulate the narrative. I knew what I heard. I knew what he said, and I would make him own up to it. Tell my husband what you said. I insisted, my voice a little stronger now, despite the trembling in my hands. Tell him what you said about my daughter. Jake's face flushed an even deeper shade of red, and I could see the shift in him. Something darker, something menacing, as he started to lose control. You have no right to tell me what to do. This is none of your business, he shouted. His words were getting more erratic, and I could see his fist clench at his side. I didn't back down. I was standing tall now, despite the storm of emotions swirling inside me. This is absolutely my business, I said. You talked about my child like she was some object. That is my business. You don't get to just brush this off. Jake took a step toward me, his anger palpable. You're acting crazy, he sneered, stepping closer. This is none of your damn business. You have no right to tell me anything, especially in my own house. My heart was racing, my mind screaming to get out of this toxic confrontation. But I stood my ground, refusing to let him intimidate me. You're not welcome here anymore, Jake. Get out. Now. He took another step, but before he could get any closer, I saw something shift in his eyes. He was furious, but there was something else, a sense of self-preservation that clicked into place. I wasn't backing down, and he knew it. His posture straightened, and in an instant, his face shifted from anger to a strange mix of disbelief and disgust. Without a word, Jake turned and stormed out of the room, grabbing his jacket and shoving it on as he walked out the door. His girlfriend, Alyssa, who had been standing in the doorway, looked on with wide eyes, unsure of what had just happened. Jake didn't even look at her as he grabbed his stuff and walked out, leaving her standing there, stunned and silent. The door slammed behind him, and I stood there, breathing heavily, feeling like I had just gone to war. But I wasn't done. No, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Daniel, still standing behind me, seemed lost in the situation. He hadn't moved during the confrontation. His eyes flicked from me to Jake's retreating figure and back again, but he didn't seem to understand what had just transpired. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the frustration, the feeling of being utterly alone in this fight. I had confronted Jake, had made him face the consequences of his actions, but now I had to deal with the aftermath. What the hell just happened? Daniel asked, his voice a mixture of confusion and irritation. He was still processing the scene, his eyes flicking nervously to the door Jake had just stormed out of. What did I miss? What's going on? I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me again, and I tried to keep it in check, but it was hard. My whole body felt like it was on fire. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but I knew this moment would change everything. Jake! He was talking about Isabella? I said quietly, my voice shaking with emotion. He was talking about our daughter, Daniel, like she was some object, something to be ogled. He was talking about her in a disgusting, inappropriate way. He said if she were 18, he'd have his eye on her. The words tasted bitter in my mouth, like I couldn't fully grasp them as I spoke them aloud. Daniel's expression froze. His face paled, and for a moment it felt like time stood still. He blinked rapidly, his eyes darting between me and the door that Jake had just walked out of. What? He whispered, as if he hadn't fully processed what I had just said. Jake was talking about Isabella? I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper now, but the weight of it felt like 1,000 pounds. He said those words about our daughter, and you didn't hear any of it. Daniel stood still for a long moment, the disbelief etched all over his face. I could see him searching my face, his mind racing to make sense of what I was saying. But then, just as quickly, the look of disbelief shifted into something else, something darker. He rubbed his face with both hands, clearly struggling to reconcile what I had just told him with the friendship he had with Jake. I don't believe it, Daniel said slowly, shaking his head. His words were barely audible, as if he were trying to convince himself that I had misunderstood. Jake wouldn't. Don't you dare, I snapped, my voice suddenly filled with an edge of bitterness that I hadn't meant to reveal. Don't you dare defend him. He spoke about my daughter like she was a piece of meat. Daniel, and you need to face it. This is your friend. Your brother. Right? So now you need to choose. Choose who you're going to stand by. Daniel took a step back, his face contorting with the weight of my words. His eyes flickered with uncertainty, but then they hardened, the defense mechanism of denial coming into play. I need to talk to him. I need to get his side of this. Maybe it's all a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? My voice broke as I spoke. You don't need to talk to him, Daniel. You need to understand that what he said is unforgivable. This isn't about getting his side. This is about you seeing what he really is. And if you can't see that, if you can't understand that, then we have bigger problems than Jake ever could be. The silence between us grew thick. I felt the weight of what I had just said sink in. My chest was tight, and my hands were still shaking, but I stood tall, determined. I wasn't going to let this go. Not now. Not ever. Daniel opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. He looked lost, his face pale and stricken with confusion. The man I had trusted, the man I had shared my life with, was now standing there, unable to grasp the severity of what had just unfolded. It felt like the ground beneath me was shifting, like I was standing on the edge of something far more fragile than I had ever realized. This was no longer just about Jake. It was about my marriage. It was about my family, and I wasn't going to let anything destroy it, not even blind loyalty. Knock, knock. Now you're about to watch the best part of the story, but before that, make sure to subscribe to my channel so we can keep going together. Daniel's response was the last thing I expected. I stood there, my body trembling from the adrenaline still coursing through my veins, waiting for him to do something, anything. But instead of standing by me, instead of defending me, his wife, his family, he simply looked at me with a blank expression and said, "We'll deal with this later. Let's not ruin the party for Isabella." I was stunned. The words hit me harder than any slap could. I couldn't comprehend what I was hearing. My heart was pounding in my chest, my breathing shallow, and for a moment, I felt like the room was closing in on me. How could he say that? How could he brush aside everything that had just happened, everything I had just uncovered, just so he could keep the peace at some damn party? "We'll deal with this later?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper, as if the words alone had no weight. "Are you serious right now? Someone I trusted just disrespected our daughter in the worst possible way, and you're worried about a party?" He didn't answer. Instead, he turned away, as if trying to avoid the confrontation. It was like he couldn't or wouldn't understand the gravity of what Jake had done. My stomach turned at the thought. How could he be so indifferent? How could he not see the damage Jake's words had done? How could he not realize that this wasn't just some misunderstanding or trivial fight? It was an attack on our family, on our daughter. But Daniel's mind was already elsewhere. His priorities were skewed, and I couldn't shake the overwhelming feeling of being abandoned, alone in my fight to protect our family. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, and instead of reaching out to pull me back, Daniel was content to let me fall. "We should get back to the party," he said, his voice distant, almost robotic. He sounded like he was just going through the motions. "Isabella's having fun. We don't want to spoil her day." But I couldn't just turn it off like he seemed to. I couldn't just pretend everything was fine when I knew that it wasn't. I couldn't look at Isabella, my beautiful, innocent daughter, and not feel that burning ache in my chest. I kept seeing her in my mind's eye, smiling, laughing, completely unaware of the storm that had just hit our family. Her joy, so pure and untainted, felt like a cruel contrast to the chaos I was drowning in. The music blared in the background as we rejoined the party, but I felt like I was in a different world. I stood there, watching Isabella, trying to enjoy the moment for her sake, but all I could think about was what Jake had said. His words echoed in my mind, a constant, gnawing reminder of the violation. How could he say those things? How could I have let him be so close to our family for all these years? And the more I thought about it, the more I was consumed with worry. Had Jake ever said anything inappropriate to Isabella before? Had he crossed any lines, even in small ways that I hadn't noticed? I couldn't shake the fear, the dread that something had happened, something I had missed. I kept my eyes on Isabella, my heart in my throat. She was chatting with her friends, dancing, laughing, completely unaware of the storm that had passed through her life, the chaos that had shaken the foundation of our family. She was so carefree, so beautiful in her innocence. It made the pain in my chest feel sharper, more real. How could I have missed this? How could I have let someone like Jake be around my daughter, around my family, without knowing what he was really capable of? Just when I thought I might lose my mind from the swirling thoughts, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned, startled, and saw Alyssa, Jake's girlfriend, standing there with an uncomfortable look on her face. She looked hesitant, almost guilty, like she didn't know how to begin. "Can we talk for a second?" she asked softly, her voice barely audible over the music. I glanced at Daniel, who was busy talking to some of the other guests. I wanted to stay by him, to be near him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off with Alyssa. She looked nervous, like she was about to tell me something important, something I needed to hear. "Sure," I said, my voice barely steady. I followed her away from the crowd, into a quieter part of the house. As soon as we were out of earshot, Alyssa spoke, her voice trembling. "Jake has been sending me text messages about you," she said, looking down at the floor as if she couldn't bear to look me in the eye. "He's been calling you names, saying that you're overdramatic, that you're just making a scene. He even compared you to your daughter. I don't know what to do with this. I'm really sorry." My stomach dropped, and a sick feeling settled deep in my gut. I had suspected something was off with Jake, but this was a betrayal I hadn't seen coming. I didn't know what to say at first. My mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. Shock, disbelief, anger, but I managed to force out the words. "Are you serious?" I whispered, my voice shaking. "Why would he say those things? Why now?" "I don't know," Alyssa replied, her voice thick with emotion. "I tried to talk to him about it, but he got angry. He said it was nothing, that you were just being dramatic. But I couldn't stay quiet about it anymore. I think you need to know." I felt like the world was spinning out of control. I could feel the hot rush of anger rising within me, but it was tempered by something else. Something darker, something more terrifying. I felt utterly alone in this moment. Alyssa was telling me the truth, but Daniel still hadn't taken me seriously. He hadn't seen the danger Jake posed, and now it was too late. "I can't believe this," I muttered, more to myself than to Alyssa. "This is beyond everything. I can't believe he's doing this." Alyssa shifted uncomfortably, clearly wanting to offer more comfort, but not knowing how. I don't know how to fix this," she said softly. "I just thought you should know." I nodded, trying to steady my breath. "I need to tell Daniel," I said, my voice hardening. "This has gone too far." Alyssa walked with me back to where Daniel was still talking to a group of people. I didn't know if it was the right time to confront him, but I knew I couldn't let this go on any longer. As we approached, I could feel the tension in my chest tightening. The fear, the anger, the frustration. It all came to a head in that moment. I was about to face the man I married, the man I had trusted, and I didn't know if I could stand by him anymore. "Daniel," I said, my voice cool, sharp, "we need to talk." He turned toward me, his expression momentarily confused, but when he saw my face, he immediately sensed something was wrong. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice low. I glanced at Alyssa, who nodded slightly, giving me the space to say what needed to be said. I took a deep breath, and then I finally spoke the words that had been burning in my chest. "Jake is still disrespecting me. He's still sending awful things to Alyssa about me, and you're just standing by, pretending it's not a big deal. This is a big deal, Daniel. You need to start taking me seriously." Daniel opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. He was speechless. I had never seen him so quiet, but I wasn't done. Couldn't be. "I'm not asking you to defend me just to keep the peace. I'm asking you to protect this family. I need you to protect Isabella." This isn't something we can sweep under the rug. It's time for you to choose where you stand. Because right now, it doesn't feel like you're standing with me. The days that followed were a blur of frustration, confusion, and sleepless nights. I barely slept, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. Thoughts I couldn't quiet no matter how much I tried. Every time I closed my eyes, the images of Jake's words and Daniel's indifference flooded my mind. The words that had been said about Isabella echoed in my thoughts like a haunting melody I couldn't escape. My head ached from the constant replay of the situation. I couldn't stop asking myself if I was wrong for feeling the way I did. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became that I wasn't wrong. I was just trying to protect my children, my family. I tried talking to Daniel again, but each time, it felt like we were talking past each other. His loyalty to Jake seemed to cloud his judgment, his eyes refusing to see the depth of what had happened. His defense of his friend was more important to him than understanding my pain. "You're overreacting," Daniel would say, his voice calm, almost too calm for my liking. Jake wasn't even talking about Isabella. It was someone from his past. I didn't buy it for a second. Even if it wasn't about my daughter directly, the things Jake had said were still deeply inappropriate. I tried to explain that to Daniel, tried to make him see how wrong it was, but every time I opened my mouth, I felt like my words were dismissed. He seemed unwilling to see what was right in front of him. How could he defend Jake like that? How could he continue to protect a man who had disrespected our daughter, disrespected me, in such a blatant and disgusting way? It was like living in a fog, trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense at all. I kept replaying that moment in my mind. Jake's voice, the words, the laughter. How he spoke about Isabella as if she were nothing more than an object to be objectified. It wasn't just about the words. It was the fact that Daniel couldn't see how harmful that was. How could I ever look at Jake the same way again? How could I trust someone who thought that way? More importantly, how could Daniel? Each night I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling a deep sense of betrayal. I felt completely alone. My husband, the person who was supposed to have my back no matter what, was choosing his friend over the safety of our children. My heart sank every time I thought about how easily he dismissed my feelings. It was like I was invisible to him. My concerns, my fears, just brushed off as emotional. I had been the one to protect our kids all these years, and now, in this moment, I was fighting alone. Alone in a fight that should have been shared. Alone in a fight for my child's safety. The worst part was that Daniel didn't seem to understand how serious it was. He wasn't angry at Jake. He wasn't even really angry at me. It was as if he was numb to it all. I wanted him to see what I was seeing, to feel the same urgency, the same anger, but he didn't, and I felt like I was shouting into a void. Eventually, after days of tension and unresolved anger, Daniel went to Jake's house to talk things over. He came back a day later, looking exhausted, but still carrying that same air of indifference, that same unwillingness to face the severity of what had happened. He barely looked me in the eye when he spoke. "I'm sorry you feel the way you do," he said, his voice flat, almost robotic. "But I can't just throw away a 30-year friendship over a misunderstanding. It's not that simple." The apology felt hollow. It wasn't an apology for what Jake had said. It wasn't an apology for how it had affected me, how it had shattered my trust. No, it was an apology for my feelings, for me feeling hurt, for me standing up for what was right. It felt like he was more sorry for himself than for what had actually happened. And that crushed me. I had expected more from him. I had expected him to see that this wasn't about a simple misunderstanding. It was about someone crossing a line that should never have been crossed. I stood there, speechless for a moment, trying to process what I had just heard. Was he really telling me that a 30-year friendship was more important than our family's safety? More important than our daughter's well-being? I felt a surge of anger and hurt rush through me, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything. I couldn't find the words. How could I explain to him that his lack of action, his lack of urgency, was doing more damage than Jake's words ever could? How could I make him see that this wasn't about a friendship? It was about protecting our children from harm. That was the turning point for me. I couldn't keep living in this limbo. I couldn't live in a house where I wasn't being taken seriously. I couldn't live in a place where my concerns were dismissed and my family's safety was compromised. I made a decision in that moment. Jake would never be allowed near our kids again. Not after what he'd said. Not after the way he had crossed a line and the way Daniel was so willing to let him get away with it. If Daniel couldn't see the severity of what had happened, then I would have to decide what came next. I wasn't going to wait for him to wake up or come to his senses. I had already been patient. I had already waited long enough. And now my children's safety came first. If I had to fight for that, I would stand alone if I had to, but I wouldn't back down. Not when it came to my family. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if Daniel and I would ever see eye to eye again. I didn't know what the future held for our relationship. But I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't keep living in a house where I wasn't respected, where my instincts as a mother were ignored, and where my family's safety wasn't taken seriously. I would protect my children no matter the cost. And if that meant walking away from the man I loved, so be it. At least I'd know I was doing what was right. So, what do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts, feelings, or any feedback you might have. Drop a comment below. Your opinion really matters to me. Don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed the story, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on the next one. Thank you so much for sticking with me until the end of this story. Your support means the world, and I can't wait to share the next chapter with you. Stay tuned, and until next time.